Welcome everybody to the Cover 2 podcast on a beautiful Tuesday morning.
That's right.
Yeah, we have a lot of football talk coming for you today. Of course, baseball's over, basketball's kind of just beginning, and football's in absolute full swing.
It's a great, beautiful day. The Cowboys won last night. It might have been ugly fashion, you can say. There was a black cat on the field that ended up hurting the Giants, but the Cowboys won nonetheless. I'm happy. We've got football to talk about. We've got college football to talk about. The biggest matchup of the season, LSU, Alabama. Like Nick said, World Series is over. The NBA is just getting started. So right now, it is really all about football. And that is where we are going to lead today's show as we get started with a little Contenders and Pretenders series that we've played multiple times. If you are a fan of the show, you know exactly what we are talking about. We're going to start with the NFC, as the NFC is a lot more wide open than the AFC, a lot more teams involved in the NFC that have a very good opportunity to not only make the playoffs, but go far and potentially reach the Super Bowl.
Exactly. And but a little bit later in the show, we're going to go over the Alabama LSU game. Obviously, huge title implications. Number 1 versus number 2. It literally doesn't get any bigger than that. We usually are excited about that game anyways because of the rivalry and because most of the time both teams are pretty competitive. But 1 versus 2, we haven't seen this since 2011. Right. It's going to be really exciting. So we'll go over that. And then later, after that, we will jump back into Pretenders and Contenders and go over the AFC teams. There's not as many of those that we're going to go over. Let's jump into it. We got the NFC. We have 7 teams we're going to go over, which is kind of crazy because only 6 teams make the playoffs. So it's interesting, but we think there's still 7 legitimate teams that can get to the Super Bowl this year. So we're going to start off, and we're going to start off with the Washington. I'm just kidding. We're going to start off with the.
You were about to get smacked.
We're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys, because they played last night, so we can kind of analyze them a little more thoroughly as we saw them most recently. Jared, this is your team. Really weird season so far. Start 3-0, go to 3-3. Now you're 2-0 since going 3-3. Big win against a division opponent last night. Doesn't matter what their record is. Playing at MetLife Stadium on a Monday Night Football game is always big. Jared, are the Cowboys contenders or pretenders in your mind?
They are contenders with an asterisk. They are contenders as long as they are healthy. And you can say that about any team. Maybe except the Patriots because they lose Tom Brady and they can still go 11-5 and make the playoffs, right? But for just about every other team in the league, you can make that argument. But what I really mean, and the Cowboys have proven it this year, the first 3 games of the season, yes, they played lesser opponents and teams who are bad, to say the least. But when they went up against formidable opponents in the Saints, in the Packers, for instance, they weren't necessarily at full strength, even when they had their awful loss to the lonely New York Jets. They were not at full strength. They had multiple key players that were injured. So when this team is healthy, yes, I think that they've proven that they can play consistently enough to compete with any team in the NFL, including the Patriots. And they showed last night, even though they got off to a rocky start in the second half, things picked up. The one consistent, I believe, has been their defense. Right, their defense was stout. Saquon Barkley was, other than one screen pass that he caught and took it for like 50 yards, he was basically non-existent. Sean Lee, Jalen Smith, the 2 linebackers, they were without Leighton Vander Esch, who was one of their up-and-coming stars. But this defense as a whole really carried this team, caused turnovers, and gave the offense short fields, gave them good fields to work with. So when the Cowboys are healthy, yes, they are contenders. Will they stay healthy for the rest of the year? Because if they're not, I don't think they have the depth to sustain winning games if they don't have their starters on the field.
Yeah, no, and that's always tough, like you said, for most teams if you're losing star players. And the Cowboys do have a lot of depth, but it just, they still have it. It's funny, I said this a while back, and it still kind of has held true so far. They did have the big Sunday night game against the Eagles, but they still haven't played a really, really, really good opponent yet. In the case that that they haven't proven that they can play well against the Packers. I shouldn't say they haven't played it. They played the Green Bay Packers and they played the Saints.
They played the Saints, right?
But they haven't still proven that they can win that big game. The Eagles are good, but the Eagles are middle of the road this year, and they have some major flaws. And they did blow the Eagles out, but the Cowboys have games against the Vikings coming up. The Patriots,
right.
The Bills, the Rams. So it's some of those are a little further down the line, but those are going to be the real games. And because the Cowboys have a way better chance of making the playoffs than any other really NFC team, because they can just win their division, they'll get in. So it is still about kind of proving to us fans and analysts whether they truly are changed or if they're just the same old Cowboys they have been.
I do want to add one more point to the whole depth factor, and I think this is where I mentioned the Patriots. When they lose Tom Brady, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, right? What do? They don't miss a beat. They still went 11-5. I believe that was back in 2011. But my point to that is, I think it comes down to coaching and schemes and knowing your personnel and knowing how to put your players in the right positions to make plays. The Cowboys, as we saw, when they lost some of their starters, they lost 2 players on the offensive line, 2 of their 3 starting wide receivers, and 2 of their 3 starting cornerbacks for a few weeks, for a few games a few weeks ago. And you could tell that I think it comes down to coaching, because they were not able to scheme up plays to put their players in position to make plays, right? It was kind of just like, oh, well, we're going to run the same type of offense, the same type of defense, and expect these backups to perform as well as our starters, and you just can't. They're backups for a reason, right? You have to be able to manage the game, change your scheme to a certain extent to put your players in a position to make plays. So I think that's where Jason Garrett, is always on the hot seat, whether the team wins or loses. This is on Jason Garrett and how him and his coaching staff will be able to coach his team, because, like I said, their starters are talented enough to go up against anyone in the league. But they either have injuries or when they just give their starters a little bit of a rest, that's when this team starts to kind of fumble a little bit, and you're like, okay, this is when they're not playing up to par, right? The Patriots, the Ravens, the Saints, they lost Drew Brees for 5 or 6 games this year. They didn't miss a beat. They went undefeated. The Cowboys lose Dak Prescott or they lose Ezekiel Elliott, and I'm not so sure that you can say the same thing about them going undefeated.
No, and even I'm glad you brought up the Saints. I was just about to bring them up. And then also if you look at the Chiefs' last 2 games, they go into Green Bay and go into Minnesota. Did they play at Minnesota?
It was actually, those were home games.
They're both home games?
They're both home games.
Okay, so I was completely wrong with that. But they play those 2 top opponents, and Matt Morris, quarterback, who's never been a world beater, quarterback, barely ever really played, goes in, loses by 7 to a legitimate contender in the Packers, and then they go and they beat the Vikings. So, again, those are some high-level coaches, but we're talking about pretenders and contenders here, so we have to bring that kind of stuff up. And the Cowboys, like I said, they haven't beaten really anybody this season besides the Eagles, and the Eagles, we don't really even know for sure if they are a legitimate team yet. So, but yeah, let's move on. I do personally think the Cowboys are contenders, but it's because more of their roster rather than history. So I'll give them the luck, is that this is the best Cowboys team I've seen really since the 90s, to be honest. So it's going good for the Cowboys, but might change my mind if they go in and they get slaughtered by the Patriots or get beat by the Vikings this next week. So.
Right. Well, you mentioned the Vikings, right? And now they just lost to the Chiefs. So let's go to that team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay? Let's go right there. Listen, the Vikings. We all know that they have a great defense led by head coach in Mike Zimmer, who is a defensive-minded guy, defensive background as a defensive coordinator in his previous years before getting the head coaching job. Their offense led by Dalvin Cook, Stephon Diggs, and Adam Thielen on the outside. And, of course, you have Kirk Cousins, the $87 million guaranteed quarterback, right, under center. And he has had somewhat of a roller coaster season as well. The first few weeks of the year not looking like that starter who deserved all that money. And ever since he went out publicly and apologized to Adam Thielen for not giving him the ball as much, he has looked much better. Overall, though, I think this team is a defensive-minded team who, when led by Dalvin Cook, I think that they can be formidable. If you're asking for Kirk Cousins to lead you and drop back and throw the ball 30, 40 times a game and put the game on his shoulders, I think that's a recipe for disaster. So I think this comes down to coaching once again, how the Vikings offensively want to play this. We know that their defense is going to be stout. Do they choose to lean on Dalvin Cook and play action, or do they choose to lean on Kirk Cousins? I think that will really define their season or their playoff season and success.
Yeah, this is another team and another quarterback that hasn't had a lot of playoff success. You know, they moved on the year they had Case Keenum on a very, very lucky play. They realistically should have never gotten that far. So a team that hasn't had, you know, a lot of playoff success, Kirk Cousins, very scrutinized. This team reminds me a lot of the Cowboys because the coaching staff is a lot of times scrutinized as well. The only difference is they do not have a direct route to the playoffs like the Cowboys do. The Vikings are 6-3. They're one game behind the Patriots behind the Packers with a loss already to the Packers. And if they were to lose to them again, it would essentially be like you're 3 games back. So now they don't play them again until the second last game of the season. So more than likely that game will be for the division. But so this team, you know, this team's competing with the Seahawks and Rams as well, and all these other teams that are battling for these playoff berths down in the wild card round because they already are 2 games back of the Packers. The Packers look like a better team at times. There's other times where the Packers don't.
Like this past Sunday.
Exactly. But there's a big difference. The Green Bay Packers have Aaron Rodgers, and the Minnesota Vikings have Kirk Cousins. Both I believe, have a lot of guaranteed money. I forget what Rodgers' contract is. But, you know, that's the biggest difference there between the team. I don't want to go to the Packers right now because we're going over the Vikings. But I am going to say they're pretenders. I do not think they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I just cannot trust Kirk Cousins. I've been wrong before. I never thought Nick Foles would win the Super Bowl before. I never thought Joe Flacco would win the Super Bowl. So there's guys that I'm wrong about, and defense does win championships, and they have a great defense. But you just got to have the quarterback too. And I just see if you get into the playoffs and let's say you're 6th seed, right? Because that's probably what they would get because the Seahawks are world beaters. You're playing who they would potentially play Green Bay again, or they would potentially play. Let's see who else with the New Orleans Saints with Drew Brees. I don't even like those first round matchups. So it's like,
say it with some conviction.
You know,
you don't trust the Vikings.
No, I don't. I don't trust Kirk Cousins.
Thank you.
I was
waiting.
They have such a good They have such a good defense.
Right.
I'm always going to be like, again,
Right.
I didn't think the Broncos would win that one year when they had Brock and Peyton Manning. So there's always that chance. But I just looking at it in the way they're probably going to be 5th or 6th seed, and they're going to have to play Green Bay, or they're going to have to play the Saints again. That's just tough.
Listen, I'm sorry. No offense. This is not that difficult. I understand that they have a great defense, and in my opening statement about this team, I did mention a bunch of things. They will not go anywhere, or they will not go far in the playoffs because of Kirk Cousins. Right? He is not the guy that you want to lean your team on if you need big plays, right? Yes, during the regular season, he's proven with the Redskins and with the Vikings that he can put up the numbers. He can throw for 300-400 yards. He can, spread the ball around to his playmakers. We understand that. But in big moments, in key situations, whether it's in the playoffs, which I don't know if Kirk Cousins has ever been to, or in a big regular season game trying to get into the playoffs, Kirk Cousins has shown that he cannot do it. He does. So from that standpoint, if you're a Minnesota Vikings player and you're a teammate of Kirk Cousins, you have to be saying, hey guys, it's on us. And you're not going to go out and publicly say that or even say that out loud. But in your head, I don't know how you can trust Kirk Cousins from his body of work so far in the NFL. And he's been in the league long enough to where we are allowed to define him by his success, right? It's not like he's a rookie or he's in his second year and you have to give him time to develop. We know who and what Kirk Cousins is. He is a regular season quarterback. In the postseason or in big-time games, I should say, he does not show up. So for that reason, the Minnesota Vikings are pretenders, and I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, no. It's again, it's a lot like the Cowboys. These teams got to prove it, and they're going to have, tough matchups in the first round.
And they're facing off this Sunday night.
Yeah,
Cowboys, Vikings in Arlington, Texas, at Jerry World.
That's a bigger game for the Vikings than it is for the Cowboys because. And we're going to switch to the Packers right now. The Packers definitely don't have a more difficult schedule than the Vikings. They have an easier schedule. They are already, like I said, a game ahead with a win over the Vikings. I see this Packers team ending no worse than 12-4 this year, just based on their schedule. Now, if the Vikings, do win a lot of games and it comes down to one game and the Vikings are able to beat the Packers, then you have this debate on who wins the division and all that stuff. But I just think this Packers team is going to be the division winner. They're going to go into the playoffs. They're going to potentially be the number 1 seed in the NFC as well, because they do play the 49ers head-to-head. So, it's going to be really interesting. And so, like I'm saying, for the Vikings, it's a little more important game for the Vikings against the Cowboys than it is for the Cowboys, but a big game overall. But let's transition fully to the Packers. Do you agree with me that the Packers will win the NFC North, and do you think they are contenders or pretenders?
So the Packers will
you kind of can answer both questions.
Right. The Packers will win the NFC North because they have Aaron Rodgers, and even though they have a rookie first-time head coach and Matt LaFleur, Aaron Rodgers can essentially do what he wants, right? Even though he may not be calling the plays, if it comes down to a crunch time situation or something, you're gonna let Aaron Rodgers do his thing. I've got a bad taste in my mouth from this past weekend's game when the Packers basically didn't show up. Right, they traveled cross country to play right here in Los Angeles against the Chargers in a stadium that was way more pro Packers crowd than it was Chargers crowd. And the Chargers came out and completely dominated, at least from a defensive standpoint. Aaron Rodgers was sacked multiple times. You rarely see Aaron Rodgers on the ground because he gets the ball out so quickly. But they did not have an answer for this LA Chargers pass rush. And then, the Chargers were able to do just enough against a very good Packers defense, right, who throughout most of the year has been very surprising. They went out in the offseason and got a bunch of key veteran players to come in, especially on that defensive line. And then they drafted Rashawn Gary out of Michigan with their first-round pick. So they kind of retooled that defense, but the defense didn't step up enough and kind of, carry the offense for the offense's mistakes. So I've got a bad taste in my mouth from this loss against the Chargers for how they lost, not necessarily because they lost, but if they can turn around and overcome that, and Aaron Rodgers can come out and lead this offense like we know they do, then I'm just going to chalk this one up as a fluke and say that the Packers really should have no problem winning the NFC North.
No, and that's what I'm saying. When you look at, yes, the Chargers game looked like a pretty easy win, or at least not getting blown out, which they did. That was very surprising to me too. But besides the 49ers, which would be a huge game, and besides the game later in the season against the Vikings, here are the teams they play. They play the Panthers at home with the backup quarterback. They play at the Giants, the Redskins, the Bears, who seem to not figure out what they've done, and then they finish the season at the Lions. So those are all very winnable games, and that's why I'm saying I don't think they lose more than 2 games here at the end of the season, and I don't see the Vikings only losing 1. So it's the Packers will go in. More than likely, they'll have a very, very good record. They'll be going in there trying to battle for record with some of these top teams, and they'll be fighting for that bye. And that's why I just think they're contenders. Do you think they are legitimate contenders for the Super Bowl?
Yes, I do. I you know what? They didn't lose that game against the Chargers. That's a throwaway. We're gonna say that every team gets one, pass for the season.
No, and their only other loss
was
on
the
Thursday
Packers'
night.
pass. So yes, I do think they are legitimate contenders, and it's really because of Aaron Rodgers, right? You take Aaron Rodgers away from this team, and this is a 500 at best team. Aaron Rodgers is that good. He can do that much. He makes depth, 4th and 5th wide receivers look like Pro Bowlers. So the fact that they haven't had Devontae Adams for the last few weeks, he finally comes back this week, and their offense looks worse than it did without him. So because of Aaron Rodgers, I think the Packers are contenders, and once they get in the playoffs, Aaron Rodgers, Super Bowl winning quarterback, we know that he can carry a team. Yes, they are.
Yeah, and I think they have a much more improved defense than they have had a lot of these other years. Although the offense hasn't flowed as well this year, I just think you look at that defense and you look at, arguably top 3 quarterback in the league, maybe even best quarterback in the league, that will give you a chance against, some of these teams that don't have these quarterbacks and don't have the confidence in the playoffs. So, and he has won a Super Bowl as well. Like, it happened a long time ago, but he has been there and done that and won it before, which is a huge thing in the NFL. All right, let's switch over to let's go to the New Orleans Saints. We won't jump into the NFC West just yet. Saints, I think, we were just talking about this when we were talking about the Cowboys and their coaching in Minnesota. the Saints, you would have chalked up, they should be battling in the division with the Panthers and all this stuff. And they're 7-1 and literally haven't lost since Drew Brees was injured against the Rams. So it's just, this team is well coached. They have a great defense. They, to be honest, should have won the Super Bowl last year with a very similar team. They have a great wide receiver. Alvin Kamara is going to come back. Drew Brees is back. I don't see any reason why anybody would say this team isn't a contender for the Super Bowl. And the fact that they went 7-1 and they really don't have a hole. And to be honest, even if Drew Brees were to get hurt again, I still would call them a contender with Teddy Bridgewater. So this is an easy one for me. They're a great team. They're going to win the NFC South. They're going to be battling for that top seed as well, and I think they're absolutely a contender.
This is probably one of the easiest contenders picks that we have today. Listen, when they go undefeated with a backup quarterback, even though it's Teddy Bridgewater, who has NFL experience as a starter, that says something. I think the most surprising thing about this team is their defense and how well they're playing. Throughout the years, we've known the Saints to be offensive juggernauts. You have Drew Brees, head coach Sean Payton, and a list of talented wide receivers and running backs that this team has had. But the defense has always been the question mark, right? Can they rush the passer? Can their secondary hold up just enough, right? And they've been good enough. This year, their defense is almost leading the team, especially with Drew Brees out. So there is no question, there is no other team in the NFC South that can compete with the Saints. Carolina, if they had Cam Newton, maybe, but they do not. So not even by default. It's because the Saints are that good.
Yeah.
They're arguably the best team in the NFL, regardless of AFC or NFC. So without a doubt, the Saints are contenders, and I see the Saints going 13-3, maybe even 14-2. This team is on a mission to prove that they should have been in the Super Bowl last year, and I can see them being there this year.
Yeah, the only playoff team they're going to play for the rest of the season is the 49ers, which is not easy.
That would be a great game, by the way.
Yeah,
and a big test for them. But no, Saints. This is a no-brainer, and Saints are in.
No, exactly. So I just mentioned the 49ers, so we'll jump into them. They are the only remaining undefeated team in the NFL. Not a lot of people would have thought that here in is it week 9 or week 10?
Oh, we're going into week 10. We just finished up week 9 as my Cowboys beat the Giants. We finished week 9. Any chance I can get to plug the Cowboys,
no,
it's going to happen.
It's fine. You guys got a big game next week. You needed the win. I understand. But 49ers are 8-0. Really have dominated most of the games they've played as well, and really have shown that they are legitimate. This defense has finally done what they were supposed to do and what they play. I mean, they had 8 first-round picks for defensive guys the last couple of years. They finally got their quarterback. They have Kyle Shanahan. This team is 8-0. There's one problem with this, though. And the only reason why I'm not going to say this team is for sure a contender is because they have one hell of a schedule left to play. Okay? You could have said they had a little easier schedule to start this season. You can legitimately say that. Their next couple, here's the rest of their schedule. They play the Seahawks, the Cardinals, Packers, Ravens, Saints, Falcons, Rams, and Seahawks. Okay? Yes, there's the Falcons and there's the Cardinals in there as well. The Cardinals almost beat them on Thursday Night Football.
Yikes.
The Falcons are terrible, so they'll win there. But, I mean, you only have 2 legitimately winnable games the rest of the season. This is why I said the Saints and Packers are going to be battling for that number 1 seed, those buys, because I don't think the 49ers, you can just say even if they're undefeated, are just going to end up being 1 or 2 seed. They could easily be 3 seed, especially going head-to-head with both those teams. So I need to see more of Jimmy Garoppolo. This team is still too new to me. I'm not going to have the 8-0 record blind me. I do not think this team is a contender yet, and it's just because of the youngness of this team and the lack of schedule that they've played so far.
I've got 3 things to say about this team. Number 1, they are contenders because of their defense. Their defense is the number 1 in the NFL, right? I think they're ahead of the Patriots. I think they're ahead of the Ravens and the Saints. Their defense can travel and play anywhere, anytime, on any planet. They have a run-first offense, which also travels, right? You have a great defense and you have a great running game. Those 2 things travel very well. So for those reasons, I believe the 49ers are contenders. My only hesitation with this team, and I'm glad that you brought up their scheduling because I wasn't even going to talk about that, it's Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Jimmy Garoppolo needs to prove that he can, be the leader, that he can carry the team on his shoulders. And when you need him to drop back on a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, you know that he's going to be able to make that play. Whether he's passing to George Kittle, Emmanuel Sanders, whoever it may be, we need to be able to see that Jimmy Garoppolo can do that on a consistent basis. And until we do, I think there's going to be question marks about Jimmy G and him on a big-time stage. So the fact that you brought up that schedule right there, there's going to be two things that need to happen to the 49ers. The 49ers either crumble because of that schedule and they aren't able to kind of have their sustained success that they've had, or they're going to surprise people even more and run the table by going 6-1 or something like that down this stretch. And if they do that, if they run the table against that gauntlet of a schedule, the San Francisco 49ers will undoubtedly be the favorite to win the Super Bowl ahead of the Patriots and ahead of the Saints.
And honestly, that's what I'm saying. So, Garoppolo has gone, I believe it's 14-2 so far in his career. I think it's the most sketchy 14-2 any quarterback's ever done to start their career. I think most of the quarterbacks, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is the next coming. But it just, they played an easier schedule the year he went 6-0. Then last year he got hurt. This year they're 8-0. But again, like I said, he really has never faced a true scheduled gauntlet like this. And you're right. This is what I'm saying. I'm saying they're not. I cannot call them contender right now because they've legitimately not played anybody.
They did what they were supposed to do. You can say the same thing about the Patriots.
True. But here's what I'm saying. If they lose the Seahawks, they lose the Packers, they lose the Ravens, they lose the Saints. That's at that point they're just middle of the pack, and that's why I'm not gonna. With the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not proven it. He's never been in the playoffs. He's been a career backup up until getting this job handed to him and getting a lot of guaranteed money handed to him. He kind of falls in the same place as Dak and Kirk Cousins. I just don't know. And there's a lot of fans that I talk to that are 49ers fans as well, because we have a couple of those here in Southern California, that say, yeah, we're great. Our only weakness is our quarterback. And that is huge. And it's a running theme so far right now here in this Pretenders and Contenders segment, is that there are quarterbacks that we legitimately trust, and there's other quarterbacks that we don't. And if the 49ers had gone and they beat the Seahawks, and they had beat the Packers, and they beat the Ravens, it'd be a different story. But they have so many big games coming up, including a Monday nighter next week, which is it's at home, but it's against Seattle, who we know is a great team. So you are saying they are contenders?
They're contenders. Yeah.
I'm not ready to say that. I gotta see. Give me until after they play the Ravens, and then maybe I'll change my mind. If they win 3 out of 4 of those games, I'll change my mind about them for sure. Okay. Switching up, we just mentioned the Seahawks, so we'll jump into them. 7-2 on the season. Russell Wilson playing like an MVP so far. They're contenders to me. They improved their defense from the last couple of years. They added Jadeveon Clowney. A lot of teams can't say that. This offense is flowing a little bit better than it has the last couple of years. The only problem with them is if they don't win the division, they don't get a home game, and home games in Seattle obviously matter a lot in the playoffs. But I think this team's absolutely a contender. I think Russell Wilson's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Pete Carroll has proven it, obviously, being to 2 Super Bowls, winning one in blowout fashion. I think they've missed the playoffs, once since Pete Carroll? Since they went to those Super Bowls? I don't know that exact
stat, but...
I don't know, yeah. But they haven't been a bad team in a while. I think they've been at least 500 ever since they've been going to these Super Bowls. So consistency matters, and they've won a lot of big games, and the only losses so far are to the Saints and Ravens, which is not anything to hang your hat on. It was kind of a blowout loss to the Saints at home, which was a little bit alarming, but the Saints have kind of shocked everybody. So yeah, no, this team's a contender for me. Russell Wilson, Jadeveon Clowney, Bob Wagner, any day.
No doubt they are contenders. They're only contenders because of Russell Wilson. You take Russell Wilson off this team, and they are a below 500 team. They have 15 sacks as a whole, as a defense, with Jadeveon Clowney and Ansah as their 2 defensive ends right now. Yes, you have Bobby Wagner, who's one of the best linebackers in the league, but I don't trust his defense. This defense just gave up 34 points to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and almost lost. The game went to overtime, where Russell Wilson had to pull out his Houdini hat and lead this team again. So because of Russell Wilson, they are contenders. But Russell Wilson gets injured, or Russell Wilson takes a dip in his play in any stretch, and this team is no longer contenders because I do not trust this defense. This is not the Legion of Boom. Other than Bobby Wagner, there is no one else on this defense that I really trust. Jadeveon Clowney, yes, but like I said, as a whole, this team only has 15 sacks, which is like 27th or 26th in the NFL right now. Yeah. So I don't trust this defense. I trust Russell Wilson because he is healthy and because I believe he is the MVP to date. I will say that the Seahawks are contenders, but it will take an MVP-like performance the rest of the season for the Seahawks to not only get in the playoffs, but to go far.
Yeah, no, I just think with the way Russell Wilson has played, with the way he has just never regressed as a quarterback, and I do think that defense can improve. I think they have enough star power and they have enough leadership on that team, and a lot less distractions on that defense the last couple of years. You know, they Richard Sherman, who was getting hurt, and he was always a loud voice in the locker room. Earl Thomas obviously didn't want to play for them for a while. Cam Chancellor. All this stuff, they kind of have a lot of those guys gone, and it's more of a mix of new players and more loyal players to that team than there before. So, yeah, no, they're contenders for sure. Last one we're going to do in the NFC is the Los Angeles Rams, and this might be the most interesting one we do, which is why I saved it for the end. The Rams, 5-3 so far, 2-game winning streak. A lot of sketchy losses, a lot of questions about this team, but they were in the Super Bowl last year. They do have Sean McVay, they do have Jared Goff, and they do have still a solid defense. But Jared, are they true contenders to get back to the Super Bowl?
The Rams are not contenders this year. And listen, you mentioned off a list of Pro Bowlers and star players on that team as a whole. And, of course, Sean McVay, the offensive guru, young offensive guru, one of the youngest coaches in the NFL, if not the youngest. But listen, it's just more of a gut feeling, right? The Rams had somewhat of a tough schedule to start out the gate, and you just, whether it was, kind of injuries to Todd Gurley, Brandon Cooks has had concussions, and he's been in and out of the lineup. The offensive line has been horrible, just atrocious for this Rams team. Jared Goff has not had any time to drop back and pass. And this defense, yes, they have Aaron Donald. They do now have Jalen Ramsey, but as a whole, this defense led by Wade Phillips is not what it was in recent years. They've been giving up way too many points. They gave up over 40 points and got blown out at home to the Buccaneers earlier in the year. This is the second time that I mentioned the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers are nowhere near contenders, right? So this Rams team to me, they don't have the feel or the look. You think them coming off of a Super Bowl loss and the way that they lost, they will be motivated like no other to come back and redeem themselves. And so far, I just don't feel that we've seen that. Now, the Rams do have somewhat of an easier schedule coming up, so I believe that they will continue to win ball games and stay in that NFC West hunt. But it's more of a gut feeling than anything else. I feel that whether it's teams that have figured out this Sean McVay offense a little bit more, or the fact that the injury bug has piled up, I don't see this Rams team as contenders. And unfortunately, because of the division they play in with the 49ers and the Seahawks, who we just spoke about, I think that will leave the Rams out of the playoff picture. Yeah, it's tough. The Rams' schedule actually is a little bit more tough than I thought. When I was talking about the Rams, having a little easier route to the playoffs, that was when the Cowboys were really struggling, and there was other teams in there that were struggling a little bit, but. They'll be battling with the Vikings and Panthers to try to make the playoffs. They do have an advantage over the Panthers because they beat them in week 1, so that does help. But it is kind of the same thing with me. It's more of a feel thing. Jared Goff's not playing as well. The offense isn't flowing. Todd Gurley's still not there. The defense is like traded away half their team during the season. You know what I'm saying? At least their secondary. Yeah, you add Jalen Ramsey, but there's a lot of guys that have no business playing for a contender in that secondary now. So it's just this team is kind of sketchy, and this team is more like 49ers, where if they go and they'll probably beat the Steelers, and they should beat the Bears. They should beat the Cardinals twice this season. But if they go in and they beat the Ravens and they beat the Seahawks, I'm gonna change my mind a little bit about that and be like, okay, they are back. And Todd really does start running the ball better. Like, this team has room to improve, and they should be 7-3 before their next real difficult matchup here. So that does help.
that does help. But again, if they're not 7-3, then that means they lost to a subpar team again. And so it's just, we'll see with the Rams. But yeah, right now they're not contenders, and it's sad to say because they were so close. And just maybe a couple adjustments at halftime maybe would have won them a Super Bowl.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
And changed stuff and not given the Patriots like their 16th Super Bowl in a row. All right, so we're going to move completely now to we're going to stay on football, but we're going to move to college football. And speaking of
huge matchup.
Speaking of pretenders and contenders, both these teams are contenders for the college football playoff, which does get released later today. But regardless, this matchup is still insane. We're talking about LSU and Alabama. Going to be played at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama. Hasn't really mattered who the home team is a lot of times in this game. And they've played each other so often the last couple of years. Because they do play each other every single year, but they've played each other in the national championship before too. So it's a little different now because you have, obviously the two different quarterbacks and a different coach in Ed Orgeron. This is his first real huge matchup against Alabama since becoming head coach, since Les Miles isn't there anymore. This is a very interesting matchup because these teams are very even. I know that's probably an easy thing to say because they're so close in ranking, at least for the AP poll. But there's one difference for me that has changed about LSU. And that is they have a great quarterback. Last couple of years, they've kind of relied on the running game. Leonard Fournette.
No. Not last couple of years. In LSU's history, they have not had a quarterback like they do now in Joe Burrow. Okay, I'm sorry to say it. They have never had as talented of a quarterback as they do now. It is LSU's time to win this season. If LSU does not win this year with this good of a quarterback who's in the Heisman running and who will be drafted in the NFL, LSU will never beat Alabama again. I'm sorry. LSU has always had a great defense. They've always had good running backs. They always have great secondary players, all that stuff, everything except the quarterback. Yeah. They have that this year. They have to win this year.
That's what I'm trying to say. They have a great quarterback. They have a defense. They have a good running game. And it's just, who's going to win. When you look at the stats on paper, there's a lot of similarities between these two teams. Total yards, both teams are in the 500s, only separated by about 30 yards. Yards allowed on defense, teams are only separated by 8 yards. And really the only difference here I can see is that Alabama gives up a little more rush yards. LSU amazingly is only allowed, they're averaging less than 100 yards per game. From the rush game, and they've played better opponents than Alabama so far.
No, their schedule has been a lot better. Alabama has also, before the season started, they lost 2 of their starting linebackers, and they're also very young on defense. So I think that's why this team, was still kind of figuring itself out. And later in the season, those freshmen are not freshmen anymore because of the experience that they've had. But Alabama is not the defensive juggernaut that we have been known to see. I think because they are so green and so young on almost every front on their defense. But this game is still at home, and Alabama, they deserve to be favored. Here's one thing I will say. LSU has not beaten Alabama since 2011. That was in Tuscaloosa, but it has been several years since LSU has knocked off Alabama, right? It's a little scary. So I think LSU, the fact that they haven't won in so many years, the fact that they now have a great quarterback, right? Alabama's very young on defense. I don't know if we're gonna do game picks yet, but I don't know if you can tell. I'm leaning towards LSU in this game.
I think it's clear, yes.
The underdog pick. LSU's defense is nasty. Like you said, they've already played their schedule is easily better than Alabama's, which means that LSU has played much better competition. I think they're more prepared for this game. And I think for Joe Burrow, this game would prove that he not only deserves some real Heisman votes, but that he deserves to be like a first-round draft pick in the NFL. So I think this game is a lot more than just, LSU, Alabama winning a regular season game, potentially getting to the national title. I think this game has huge individual kind of matchups and potential consequences.
No, that's a good point. You're looking at 2 of the Heisman finalists, 2 of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, and you're also looking at 2 of the top draft picks in the NFL as well. This might teeter who a team picks based on this game. Now, there is always a possibility these teams rematch later this season in the college football playoff. But for now, we're just going to look at this game. And you brought up the schedule. That's my biggest thing right now. As I said, the stats are very similar. Yes, LSU's rush defense is impressive, but you look at the schedule. Here's who Alabama has played this season. Okay, they've played Duke, New Mexico State, South Carolina. One of the teams I don't even know who it is. Mississippi, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Arkansas. None of those teams are ranked as of right now. So they have legitimately played nobody great this season. And then they're going to have to play LSU. So you look at LSU's schedule to give them some credit. Started the season with Georgia Southern, but they have played at Texas, Florida. They played Florida, and they played Auburn, and they've won every single one of those games. All of those teams at the time they played them were ranked in the top 10.
Wow!
And all three teams,
top 10 wins.
All three
in one
teams
season.
are still ranked. So it's literally a direct opposite in there. They've also beat Mississippi State as well this season, and gone into Vanderbilt and won it. So that's not that impressive. But you're looking at LSU has everything running for them right now. And the other interesting thing is too, because I think we're both picking LSU here. We're both picking LSU. I don't care about the spread or anything like that. This is LSU's time. They have, in my opinion, the better quarterback. They have a better team overall. They've played more competition. And the other thing about this game, Jared, does the committee dare not put Alabama in the college football playoff if they lose this game?
Yes.
And they go,
yes.
Will the committee do that, though?
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Because of what you just said, look at their schedule. Who have they played?
And then by the way, here's who else they play. They play, let me get back to this. I'm looking at else.
They also still have to play Auburn in the Iron Bowl.
True.
Right?
Yeah, which is a tough game. But they play Mississippi State, and they play whoever the hell at WCCU is, Western Carolina. So this is what I'm talking. Like Jared, they've played nobody. This is a lot like Clemson too. This is where we need to prove to the college football gods that Clemson and Alabama don't just get these passes based on the roster.
Not at all. Not
Okay?
at all. Not this year.
If Alabama loses this game, they are out. Unless LSU loses again. Okay? Like they're not in.
No.
Unless maybe there's a lot of other teams that lose again and Alabama's in there and there's a lot of 2-loss teams. But essentially I think this is do or die for Alabama, which is crazy.
Let's get back to the actual game for a minute, because I think there's one thing that we've overlooked, or at least we haven't talked about yet. Tua is still not 100% right now, right?
True.
He's injured. He's by head coach Nick Saban a potential game time decision for this game, right? Which means even if he does play, he's probably going to be nowhere near 100%, right? So, and I'm sorry, I don't know who Alabama's backup is right now. But if Tua does not play in this game, I think it's even more of it's an automatic win for LSU. Because if LSU does not beat Alabama without their starting quarterback, for how great of a defense LSU is and for how well that LSU has played this year, they go into Tuscaloosa and they lose to Alabama with a backup quarterback, then LSU does not deserve to be in the college football playoff. I will say that loud and clear any day of the week.
Yeah, because the thing about this game, too, is because these teams play in the same division, the winner of this game, like we said, more than likely is going to
play Georgia.
Yeah, they're going to play Georgia, and they're going to have that extra game. So even if we're looking at LSU, imagine if LSU's schedule consisted this year of at Texas, Florida, Auburn, Alabama, and Georgia.
And they win all those games?
Well, I mean, but even if they lose one, it's like, okay, maybe you give them a chance still. I just think Alabama, if they lose this game, they're not going to get to play Georgia.
Not at all.
They get to play Western Carolina, who's a D2, the Catamounts. All right, so it's
go Catamounts.
Yes, we're saying that right here on the Cover 2 podcast. If Alabama does not win, they should not be allowed in the college football playoff. And this is exactly the same with Clemson as well. If Clemson loses, they should not be in unless there's a bunch of 2-loss teams that look worse. But I just don't think that's going to happen this year. Ohio State looks like a world beater. LSU looks like a world beater. Georgia's improved. They had a bad loss, but these teams have still played a good schedule. You don't just get to skate by your roster. And I hope that the committee does that. And I hope the committee shows something tonight on the rankings. Maybe we're hoping for Alabama to be 3 or 4 going into this game. Maybe this isn't 1 versus 2. And then that will show more of it. I think if Alabama's going into this game number 2, that already is kind of planting that seed. Is like, okay, look, they're doing it again, right? But so I'm trying to find out who the backup quarterback is for. It's a guy named Mac Jones, and then
he was a top-rated Mac Jones guy. Like I said, I'm sorry that I forgot his name.
Yeah.
He's a top-rated quarterback coming out of high school, but still, he doesn't have the experience that Tua does. He won in the game last week, but listen, going up against that LSU defense, it will be the toughest defense that this Alabama offense has had to face all year long. So LSU has the corners to match up with Jerry Jeudy and the rest of these highly touted receivers that Alabama is going to put out there. So I'm not saying they're going to leave them out on an island, but you will not be able to just throw at will like Alabama has been able to do for the entire season. They will be stuffed in some type of way, and LSU will force Alabama to become one-dimensional, I believe. So I know we're kind of running out of time. We need to move on. I'm picking LSU to win this game. LSU has to win this game. This is a bigger game for LSU than it is for Alabama, in my opinion. Even though LSU has the better schedule and all of that, the committee has shown, like you said in the past, that they kind of just revert back to giving Alabama the red carpet because it's Alabama. LSU needs to go out and prove that they are the better team and that they can win on the road in Alabama, which they have not done since 2011.
Yeah, and that was the last time they played 1 versus 2 and had a matchup like this. So, yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. A lot of good storylines coming in there.
Let's go Tigers.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go LSU. Yeah, so we both think LSU's going to win. We both think that Alabama is out if they lose. Okay, moving back to the NFL because we only have about 12, 13 minutes left, so we do need to kind of rush through this. Let's start with New England Patriots. This is kind of an easy one. Obviously, they're contenders. They do have some flaws on offense, but this defense is amazing. And they kind of messed up against the Ravens a little bit. But to your point, maybe didn't have the full playbook ready, and Lamar Jackson is able to make plays.
He's just special.
Yeah, but I don't think that Ravens win over the Patriots means the Ravens are better than the Patriots. I still think until the Patriots really get blown out in the playoffs, I'm going to still stick with them to be the Super Bowl contenders and the Super Bowl winners until they literally lose. Like, they're one of those teams where, like the Golden State the last couple of years, if they just don't, I'm gonna keep them as the contenders to win the Super Bowl until they lose the Super Bowl or don't make it to the Super Bowl. Yeah, so
consistency.
Yeah, no, the 2 names: Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. That's why they're contenders.
That's all you
need. We can move on. So
thank you for talking about that because we don't even need to say anything.
Yeah, let's talk about the Ravens though, because this is probably the most interesting team in all of football. I don't think anybody expected the Ravens to be this good at this point. They're 6-2. Lamar Jackson is an MVP candidate. Who the hell would have said that before the season? There's a lot of people saying when he got drafted, he should be a wide receiver. Shout out Bill Polian. But, they had a tough loss to the Browns this season so far. And they did lose to the Chiefs. Not the worst thing ever. Patrick Mahomes was playing in that game.
Right,
we all know Patrick Mahomes.
Exactly. Right.
But they've had some very, very impressive wins. And I think more impressive wins than losses. They obviously blew out the Dolphins on week 1. I somewhat call that an impressive win.
That's a tune-up game. The Dolphins do not count. You're not allowed to say the Dolphins on this show.
Okay, can I say the Hurricanes?
Yes, you can say the Miami Hurricanes. You cannot say the Dolphins. That does not prove anything. Please move on.
Okay. And they've had big wins at the Patriots, versus the Patriots and at the Seahawks as well. And they blew out the Seahawks as well. So they're contenders. This team's defense is good. I think the shock value and the uncertainty of what Lamar Jackson is going to do on every single play is big. It reminds me of Colin Kaepernick a little bit, where you have a quarterback that's very unconventional running a team with a good defense. And nobody had really seen a Kaepernick-style quarterback. He led the Super Bowl. I do think they're contenders for the Super Bowl. I am not ready to say, obviously, they're going to win it because I don't even think they can beat the Patriots again, to be honest.
Oh, I do. Did you not see what they did to them on Sunday night?
Like I said, until the Patriots lose, I'm not saying they're losing. So it's just a bias. It's a horrible take for a sports.
We're just talking about contenders right now. We're not talking about a Super Bowl win.
They are contenders.
Okay, then they're contenders.
I'd say they're contenders.
Thank you.
I just think that there's a lot of good things. John Harbaugh has won the Super Bowl before. He's in the playoffs a lot. And this team is just, they're fun to watch, and they run a great offensive system, a lot of trickery involved. And I think the addition of Mark Ingram is also huge. They finally have a legitimate running back. Marquise Hollywood Brown is a huge addition to this team that they haven't had the last couple of years. So, yeah, no, this team is a contender. And we'll just see. Hopefully Lamar Jackson doesn't kind of regress in the playoffs. He might. I don't know.
He will not regress. You cannot stop Lamar Jackson, all right? I'm sorry. You're going on too long. You're making this a lot more difficult than it needs to be. They have a great defense, which will travel anywhere. Lamar Jackson is unstoppable. I do not care who you are. I do not care how much you prepare for him. He is a different type of cat. He can throw when he needs to, right? And he can also use his legs, as we saw on Sunday night when the Patriots had zero answers. Arguably the best defense in the NFL, the New England Patriots, had zero answers for Lamar Jackson, right? I think the Ravens can unquestionably, no doubt, go into New England.
No doubt. Did you hear that?
Yes, they can beat New England again, and this team is not only contenders. If the Ravens keep playing the way they do, they're Super Bowl contenders. They're on a Super Bowl path. I think it is very, very clear that the defense complements this offense. And you did say one thing, that this offense runs a lot of tricks. I actually think that's not true. This is a run downhill type of offense. Lamar Jackson is in the shotgun a lot of the time. Yes, they do run some kind of misdirection, but they want to kind of pound and ground the ball. They want to run, and then every once in a while play action, get Lamar Jackson in space, let him either throw the ball or give him a running lane. So I don't think it's a whole lot of trickery. I think it's just really a different form of running the ball as opposed to lining up in the I formation and running it like a traditional offense like we're used to seeing in the NFL. They're doing a little bit more of a college-style run offense, but in the end, it is still power football. They use their fullback more than any team in the NFL. Like you mentioned, Mark Ingram, former Heisman winning trophy winner, right? They like to use him a lot as well. So it is a run-first offense and then pass. And I think that is what is going to be successful for them going forward. Because like I said, that type of style of offense with their complementary defense will travel anywhere, anytime, any place.
Now we're comparing them to the Patriots, right? We're saying, oh, they got to be Patriots. But there's also another team. Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, they've already lost to the Kansas City Chiefs this year. This is a team with the most high-powered offense in all of football and potentially the best quarterback in football, Patrick Mahomes. How did they get over the hump of the Chiefs? Did the Chiefs are the Chiefs are
Oh no, they're over the hump. They're ahead of the Chiefs. There's no question.
But they lost to them though.
It doesn't matter. There's no question. They're ahead of the Chiefs.
You're really on the Ravens.
I'm on the Ravens bandwagon. Both feet in.
Yeah.
I'm all in right now. The Chiefs.
You're cannonballing into
Listen,
the
here's
bandwagon.
the Chiefs' problem is very simple. Well, at least it's simple to me. Their defense is still Swiss cheese, right? What did we say in the offseason and then the NFL predictions show? This defense has to be just good enough. All they have to do is be average. All they have to do is be average. Patrick Mahomes, when he comes back, will be the Patrick Mahomes MVP caliber quarterback that we know. But this defense cannot stop a nosebleed, right? You ask them to sit here on a 3rd and 1. It doesn't matter if it's 3rd and 1 and you know that the run's coming, or if it's 3rd and 7 and you know that they're passing. I do not trust this Chiefs defense worth a damn. I wouldn't put any money on this Chiefs defense. The only reason why this team is formidable is because of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in this offense.
But they're so good because you see that they won with Matt Moore.
Yes, and so they
almost won a second game.
They have to score 40 or 50 points to win, right? That type of team play does not travel everywhere. They will not beat the New England Patriots like that because they won't be able to stop New England Patriots. They will not be able to beat the Ravens again because I believe that the Ravens now have a book on what they need to do against the Chiefs. So, I'm sorry, the Chiefs will have to score over 35, 40 points a game because their defense will not be able to stop.
Which they can do.
Just about any team. So it is going to be a high-scoring match, and if you expect this team to get into a fight, bulldog type of match where they're having to kind of go back and forth and run the ball and control the clock and all of that, I don't see it happening. So
did you see Tyreek Hill catch up to Damian Williams?
Yeah,
there are so many more weapons on this team than just Patrick Mahomes. Like, to say that no matter what, the Ravens are just on that they lost to the Chiefs when they didn't have Tyreek Hill. Like, I'm just saying that's going to be a good matchup.
okay.
I just think that's one of the reasons we do this show because there's three legitimate contenders, and obviously do you think the Chiefs are contenders for the Super Bowl?
They're contenders. They're contenders with an asterisk. They're contenders with an asterisk because of their defense.
I agree, but last year they had a similar defense, and they still, if the coin flip would have went their way, they probably would have beat the Patriots and been Super Bowl, and they would have beat the Rams. So it's like, I don't know. With me, I just think Andy Reid's offense. It's their time. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Tyreek Hill. It's Sammy Watkins. It's Travis Kelce.
I love their offense.
The defense is poor. I agree. But to say they're contenders with asterisks, I have to disagree.
With it, how can you not say that? Their defense is bad enough to where they deserve an asterisk. Their defense does not deserve any recognition. What is their defense done?
They're not that horrible.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. You trust the Chiefs' defense in a critical situation in the fourth quarter.
Trust is not the word to use. I just trust Mahomes and Andy Reid a hell of a lot more better. In their history, the last couple of years of winning huge games.
We need to move on before we get in a fight.
We have one more team to go over, and it's a team very similar to the Chiefs. It's the Houston Texans, and they are led by another star quarterback, a quarterback that is coming to his own, that is having an MVP type year. But they are a defense that is definitely depleted this year and not as good as we originally thought. They lost J.J. Watt to injury. They traded Jadeveon Clowney. They're losing a lot of guys. They lost Tyrann Mathieu in the offseason. So it's just the Houston Texans, they'll likely win the South. Although the Jaguars just named Nick Foles quarterback. You're getting breaking news right there. So you never know there.
They're going to win the South.
But so they're going to have that kind of automatic bid into the playoffs like we were talking about with the Cowboys. But, Jared, do we think they're truly contenders for the Super Bowl?
I do, because of Deshaun Watson and this offense. Now, the reason why I hesitated there was because they just lost J.J. Watt 2 weeks ago. He's out for the year. They have multiple injuries in their secondary. Jonathan Joseph is injured. Lonnie Johnson, their rookie out of Kentucky, is injured in the secondary. Roby Coleman, one of their other corners, is also injured. They have a plethora of injuries, not only to their defense, but their secondary specifically. So the fact that I think that kind of hinders them a little bit, I think that's going to be tough for them going down the stretch. Because of their weak division schedule, I think they will no doubt win their division. But when it comes to the playoffs, when you're playing a more formidable opponent, it's going to be on Deshaun Watson. Now, he has proven that, I think he's in that MVP conversation as well. The dude was basically playing with one eye last week, as 2 weeks ago he got kicked in the eye, and he still was able to throw a pass for a touchdown on the same play, right? The guy is just unbelievable. He does not go down. He always extends plays. Oh, and you have DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best receivers in the league to throw to. That is obviously a huge weapon right there. So I'm a little concerned about this defense, but I think defensive coordinator Romeo Crennel has enough to work with that the defense, they're a better defense than the Chiefs, right? So I trust this Houston Texans defense more than I do the Chiefs, and I believe that they will be able to get key stops on a little more consistent basis to help out the Houston Texans offense. So yes, they are formidable. Yes, they are contenders. I think when they go up against either the Ravens or the Patriots, I think that will be too much for them to handle. But almost any other team in the AFC, I think the Texans can handle.
Yeah, the Texans, they benefit a lot from just having these home games all the time in the playoffs because they keep winning the AFC South and stuff like that. They'll play like the Indianapolis Colts or the Buffalo Bills in the first round. Or potentially, like I said, Jaguars. They're not going to play a good team in the first round. So they are automatically going to be advancing. So it's almost like they don't have a bye, but it's like almost them winning the division is like a bye for them because of the way that the AFC just is not as good as the NFC. That's why we're only staying 4 teams. So I think they will advance in the playoffs. They might even win a second game, but I don't think there's any way they get through the Chiefs, Patriots, and Ravens. Like, right. They're not going to win 2 of those games.
There's a ceiling for the Texans, unfortunately.
Exactly. So I don't think they're contenders. They just need to fix... and to be honest, they need to fix their offensive line in the offseason. We're like kind of throwing them away already right now. But they need to fix their offensive line, and then I think they'll be fine. The defense is still solid. You add a couple more pieces. But with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, I think they have a guy right there, and as long as they can just protect him and stop getting him hit, so we don't have an Andrew Luck type of situation, I think they have their franchise guy, and they have an eventual Super Bowl winning quarterback, but they just need to surround him with some guys. So
there you go. We are out of time for today's show, though. Thank you for joining us. That was a lot of football right there.
We forgot to talk about the Jets.
Oh, darn. We forgot about the lonely Jets who lost to the Dolphins. They gave the Dolphins.
It all started when Adam Gase was on the good stuff during this press conference.
Apparently. So there you go, Jets. You just lost and gave your rival division, the Dolphins, their first win of the season. Now both those teams are tied at 1-7. So I can't believe we just finished off the segment talking about the Jets
might get the third
and the Dolphins. Unbelievable.
The Dolphins might get the third pick in the draft.
Unbelievable. That was Contenders and Pretenders, the NFC and the AFC, as well as a look at the much anticipated LSU-Alabama matchup this Saturday. So thank you for joining us. Next week we will have more NFL talk as we really get into the second half of the NFL season, as well as more than likely a look at what happened in that LSU-Alabama game.
College football playoff rankings.
Yes, and the playoff seedings and the consequences for which team loses. But for today, I'm Jared Smith.
I'm Nick Nenad.
This has been the Cover 2 Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.